Thank you very much, Dean, and the entire staff of the Department for Social Justice, and of course, the entire university community, and those of you who are here this evening. I feel very privileged to share some ideas related to social justice, but focusing attention in particular to the development of education in my country, Nigeria. I want to share this with you. I'm hoping that through that, you will get some additional information that you probably haven't got already on the internet, because the internet is so rich now, so that some of those ideas can also go into your mind in reflecting on issues of social justice in the entire world. I will be speaking for maybe about 12 minutes. That's not too long. And then I will show some video that is related to the issue that I'm trying to talk about. That probably will go on for between 9 minutes and 10 minutes. And I think after that, if there are questions, I'll be very happy, to take this. And if there is none, I'll just also appreciate you for listening. I want to say that my background is a very humble, simple one. After my studies in Nigeria, moved on to the United Kingdom, and I was at the Institute of Historical Research at the University of London, and then, after that, I moved on to France and Germany, all these other places. But on each of the occasions, I kept on always reflecting on the issue of access to education, how people can actually have access to education so that they can be equipped through education to move on in life. I have a few slides. I think I did this just PowerPoint presentation, and Jonathan Bond, who is assisting me this week, will kindly help me supervise that one. So if I just go to the next one. So the theme I want to talk about is promoting education in Nigeria. Don't forget that Nigeria is in West Africa, and it is made up of 150 million people, and one out of every four Africans is a Nigerian. So we are 1/4 of the entire globe. We are made up of 150 million. We have about 298 languages. These are not dialect, but the real distinct national identities within the country. So Nigeria is like a supernatural country on its own. And it has, I'm sure, it has been on the news for quite a while now because of some of the frictions and the challenges that we have in development. So I will be talking about the effort that we have made in promoting education in Nigeria, so that you can begin to see the extent to which we have moved and the extent to which we also need to continue, our efforts. Yes, thanks very much. And now I was thinking that while talking about education in Nigeria, or as in Africa completely, that it is important for us to know that education, the Western education that we received, that's in terms of literacy, in terms of primary school and secondary school and university education and so on, that all this came as from the 19th century. In fact, the first school was built only in 1842. That's very recent. And the first secondary school was built the first government secondary school was built actually in 1909. It's called King's College, and it was dedicated to King George, who was then the reigning monarch in the United Kingdom, because Nigeria was a colony at that time. But I wanted to make the point that before this type of education came, Africa, indeed Nigeria, who was already it already had its education, it had its own system of education. And so I decided that I will just focus some attention on the type of education we had before the coming of Western education. And that the focus of that education was on capacity building, just to make you the best of what you were. If you are going to be a mother, you are taught skills about how to be a good mother, how to be a good wife, how to be a good manager of the home. And if you are going to be a hunter, you were taught how to shoot, aim at, your target, prepare it. Maybe you want to market it. You are taught about all that. If you chose to be a traditional medical person, you are taught skills about how you could heal wounds, how you could do some surgical operations in our own way at that time. Then you are taught things like herbs, those who later on became pharmacists and so on. And of course, if you moved into the area of religion, you are taught how you could approach your own God, how you could reflect, how you could meditate, how you could perform rituals and so on. And if you wanted to be a teacher, not in the Western type, but a teacher trying to form all the others and encourage them through the apprenticeship. There was a system of what we call the master craftsmen. And these master craftsmen will be able to encourage their younger apprentices to become capable hands, either in building, in farming, in fighting, even as rulers. So all these were there. And of course, people were skilled in things like making of clothes, beauty things. And so you find our own women, for example, they had a way of having what they call the cover, the top cover. And that top cover, if you are still a young girl, and you are still looking for a partner, the way you would tie the head, was carefully done. And if you were a young mother, the way you would tie your hair, the gear was also, different. So that, and if you were already an elderly person, married and so on, the way you would tie it is there to warn the young ones that you were not available. Because when they look at you and they say, oh, this is pretty, but as soon as they see the headgear, they know that this is not available, pretty as, the lady is. And of course, with men, it was so different. For men, if you were a traditional ruler, what you will put on will show, your identity. So on looking at a person already, you will know about that person's identity. And if you wanted to, there were dresses for different occasions. If I'm like this, it means I am going to address, a honorable audience that I want to respect and want to share idea. If I were, if it was time now to go for sports, the dress, of course, will also be different. If I was going to the farm, it will also be different. It was so elaborate. The only difference was that there was no compartmentalization. And, you could not say you spent 6 years in the primary school, you spent 3 years in the middle school, and then the 3 years in the senior middle school, then 4 years in the university, and you then graduate. And then after that, you become a graduate, and you don't learn anymore. In our own system, the traditional African education was supposed to start even from before conception. So the way your parents will be praying that you will come in, that's all part of the process. You stay for 9 months, you come out, and you keep on going, and you go into the apprenticeship system. It was not a question of just 6 years, and then you move on and you do exam. No. It was not a question of having the book first, and then you begin to take a job later, the type we have in Western education. There was always the practical aspect that was integrated. So you are learning, and you are practicing, and you are showing your competence, then you move on. You keep moving on. And then there is no time that even when you graduate, you still continue to learn. And when you get to the old age, you still continue to learn. And unlike Western system of education that would then say, when you die, then you die. It is in our own traditional education, it was believed that when you are about to die, that is the time you have to also begin to equip yourself with better skills of learning, because when you go to the other side, the outer space. You have to do what they do there. So you have to humble yourself. You want to learn. You want to make sure that when you get there, the spirit world does not throw you back. That's the traditional thing. Of course, when Western education came, everything changed. Of course, I was talking about the respect for constituted authority and all that. And the schools now came, and you could now see the schools. When the Western educations came, you now see this writing was introduced. You see that the lady there was writing on the chalkboard. You can see the building. So whether there was good equipment or whether there was space, the focus was always on learning. And then, of course, they now introduced things like pre-primary, primary, and you could see some even began to introduce the school uniform. Yes. And so that was that. And then we now come about the coming of Christian missions and the planting of Western mode of education. And everything changed. As soon as the Christian missionaries came to Africa, the Christian missionaries were already used to their own Western form of education. And they believed that it had brought progress to them and that it was helpful also to cultivate it so it would bring progress to Africa where they were staying. And so they would encourage the building of a classroom. They would make enormous sacrifice. At the time they were coming, there was a lot of challenges, health challenges. And many of them were dying. Many of them were now eating food they were not used to. They were making a sacrifice, a commitment. They were investing their own life because they believed that in the process of doing this, they would be compensated by the person who called them to be ministers and missionaries, to the whole world. But you can see them. And each time they went there, they always made sure also that you had pipe-borne water, that you began to learn about health issues, and you could see, the teacher there, was operating all of that. Many of them, the missionaries also had the hospitals, or everything was integrated. But the only thing they did was they now compartmentalized the thing that you had to take a particular exam after this 1 year and after the other and so on. And that itself had some negative effect because, the whole system of cheating at examination. There were about 16 strategies. You could cheat either by looking, at the one that is next, which you call the giraffe method, because like giraffe, you are looking at, that one. You could do it by pretending that somebody, some sheet of paper, and you could copy, those methods of cheating. And by 1904, cheating had taken a very advanced form that, they were really cheating, and those who were passing the exam were really the ones that were cheating, because in the other one that was backed with practice, if you cheated, that was a failure. But in this one, when you cheat and you get a distinction, you are celebrated. People will say, wow, this is brilliant. That would say good. That's the planting of the Western mode of education. And of course, African students now began to come to Europe, and they began to come to the United States of America. From 1922, we had Africans that had come to the United States, including the J.A.K. Agre, the first doctoral student in the United States, and who was sent as part of the missionaries that went to Africa from 1922 to 1926, and who began to think about a big plan of introducing Western education in a massive scale to cater for every dimension of need in terms of medicine, medical, professional, etc., etc. The Febstoke Commission, which I'm sure many people, are aware of. And of course, a lot of people now went to France. A lot of people went to the United Kingdom. And all these Africans now decided that on getting back, they were going to ensure that they were able to help their own people with the promotion of Western education. So on arrival at independence, they began to introduce more schools. They began to introduce more universities and so on. For example, in my own country, the first university was established in 1948. Actually, the oldest university in the whole of Africa was established in Freetown in Sierra Leone in 1876. That was the first, and it was affiliated to Durham University in the United Kingdom. But in 1948, we had the first one in Nigeria, which was University of Ibadan. And I was at that University of Ibadan as a student, and when I finished my postgraduate program, I went back there and I taught continuously in an unbroken, except when I then went on sabbatical leave to other parts of the world. I was there continuously for about 29 years, and that I thought was beautiful. Having spent 29 years just teaching the university, I became so enamored. So when James, gave me the green light that I might be sharing my ideas with university people, staff, and students today, my spirit just rose up again. I said, I am back to my familiar terrain, because on the university, excuse me, the advantage of the university is that the staff, they are the deja vu. In other words, there is very little you will be saying that is new. They already knew it. And because the dean is also here, I'm so excited. I used to be the chairman of the Committee of Deans of Education of all Nigerian universities about a number of years ago, about 25 years ago, at that time. And, I found all the deans, and all their interest always is on equipping their own faculties with improved condition of service, ensuring that the staff was well paid, that the student had all the facilities, that the curriculum was adjusted, that the circumstances and so on were favorable, and the environment conducive to learning. And, I got all that, and I was so happy, because I then said, if it is now the students also, most of the students nowadays don't have, all the information they require is all on the internet. So when they are listening to you, they are just like comparing the information they've already got on the internet with what you are saying, and they will be checking whether what you are saying is accurate or not, and that's the new mode. Anyway, when all these people started building all these universities, now African countries began to improve. And in Nigeria, for example, the former system of education was changed to the American one. Just as in Nigeria, the Nigerian political system, which was parliamentary, was altered in 1979 to the presidential to match the American because of the influence of the United States. The curriculum also, which used to be 8523, was then changed to be 663, 6334, which they believed at the time was also, part of the United States. And then I move on very quickly to say now that some of the challenges and the opportunities we have. The first one is that some of the development in some cases have been very rapid, and that now has affected the quality, because where in the past you find a lot of planning went into establishing a university. Because of political considerations, universities just spring up, just more suddenly, than in the past, and that automatically affects the quality. And with respect to most of the African countries, including Nigeria, the foreign staff that, we had that were, were able to help and ensure quality control, they left because the salary that they were being paid in Nigeria, was no longer good enough, and the retirement benefit was so small that it would not be able to keep, them in some comfortable position when they returned home. So they all left. And when there is an inbreeding, the danger then is that the quality control is then absent, and there is no comparability, anymore. And then the staff themselves, began to suffer because they discovered that their pay, was not good enough, especially with the military administration that came because of coup, and the military was spending more money on defense, rather than on education, and therefore the salary of staff, of the educational institutions began to drop, while the salary of the military began to increase, and that led to the complaint by the education staff, at every level. They were complaining all the time that their take-home pay could not take them home, and because the take-home pay could not take them home, Then they decided to go on demonstrations, on strikes, lock-ins, and so on. Sometimes I was at one stage when I was head of my department. There was a strike, against. I think you call it sit down, whatever. Anyway, they refused to teach, and we were away for almost 1 year. And the military was just saying, why are they away for 1 year? That they should stop our salaries, And when they stop your salary, that can be very frustrating and suffocating. And so we quickly went back, not gaining much. And the staffing is then affected, and the curriculum is also affected, and the partnership building at the time when we used to have the World Bank and UNESCO and so on coming to help us, all those people now decided that they were not, going to help, and that also worsened the situation. And so those are some current challenges and so on. And so I think in making this presentation, I want to say that some of the issues that we have to consider include the funding of the education. UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, made a suggestion at a stage that the funding level for all countries should remain at 26%. But it is then discovered that there were some countries that will fund as low as 4% instead of even 26%. Of course, there were some of the African countries that went sometimes, some countries like Tanzania, some countries like Ethiopia under Mengistu, that went even up to 40, 50%. But there were some countries that were funding at the level of even 2% because they needed to construct roads, they needed to get health facilities, they needed to have defense, and so on, and that also, affected them. So funding is basic. And now with the economic challenges of Africa, the situation has become even more difficult. And because of the crisis that we have also, some foreign organizations and donors are very hesitant to invest in education in those countries. So that is like a vicious circle because it's then, making things, very worse. And the second consideration is the curriculum. Namely, the curriculum, you want to make sure that the curriculum reflects the need of the society. And you must make sure that the people, the staff and students and so on are aware of the need to make education respond to the needs of the society. And where that is present, where that one is absent, it leads to discontent. And when it leads to discontent, it leads to frustration. When there is frustration, there is anger. After anger, there is irritation. After irritation, there is protest. And after protest, then you have a complete, discord. And that's not healthy, for the society. And the third and the last one I want to say is that because of some religious fundamentalism in some places, especially in Nigeria, we now have a situation in which some groups in northern Nigeria are resistant and very reluctant to continue to help to promote Western education, which they see as a form of indoctrinating themselves, and converting themselves as Christians, and that because they are Muslims, they then say that they then instituted this whole the initiative that is called Boko Haram. Boko, which means book. Haram means evil, which means that Western education is evil and they do not want that one. And that one now leads to another crisis because then they will now burn the schools and then, intimidate the teachers and drive away, and especially attack, the churches and so on. So the country has to respond to assure them that Boko, which is a book, is not evil. Western education is not evil. That Western education is the one that has actually helped in encouraging a lot of development over the years, and that it's a question of just adjusting the curriculum also to take care of the non-Christian values so that Western education will not indoctrinate you. It will just give you the choice. If you want to accept Christianity, you accept it. If you want to practice Islam, you can practice Islam, but the focus should be on development, healthy development, irrespective of the religion of your choice. And then there has to be a means of providing access for the poor, so that it is not only the children of the rich that are having access, but also the children of the poor, so that everybody will have access to education that can then encourage them to want to build the nation, first of all as Nigeria, and then Pan-Africanism, to have Africa as a complete, the one identity, that we have a vision of promoting the image, the stature, the status, the value, the aspirations, and the identity of the African peoples. Those are the challenges, and those are some of the prescriptions. And the last few minutes that I will have will now be on just showing a particular video. Why did I choose this particular video? I decided to choose this particular video because in 1977, Nigeria hosted the whole world. It hosted the whole world, the whole black world, and because of the migrations of the blacks from Africa from the 16th century, we found that there were blacks in South America, that's Brazil and all those places, and North America, the United States and Canada, and in Europe, France, Germany, England, and in Latin American countries, Nicaragua, Cuba, where there were Africans everywhere. So Nigeria decided to bring all of them to that second, we call it the second Black Festival of Arts, because the first one had been held in Senegal. It was not very successful. That of Nigeria was very successful. The third one was scheduled to have been held in Ethiopia, but then Emperor Haile Selassie, suffered the setback, because of the military coup, and it was never held. So I wanted to show you just a glimpse of what we did in 1977, which was called FESTAC, and the number of people that came, from all parts of the world, and all the black people that came from Europe, the African Americans were there, the black British were there. But in addition to that, there were also so many non-black that came in large numbers who shared the same vision, the same aspiration, those that had actually supported in independence movements, in social justice issues. They all came and then they said, justice has no color, just as blood has no color. That if you get the color of somebody, you will never be able to tell whether this is an African or whether this is a non-African. That there is just that type of shared vision, cohesion for development, for social justice, for initiatives that are addressed to development. So I thought we just share this, and the advantage of that is that I will not be talking during that time, since it will be the video, and you will also just be seeing it. And happily also, the emphasis at that and the scope is going to be on music. And you know how lovely music can be. And music, by the way, is the only tool that keeps a person awake. When you are sleeping, even during lectures, as soon as you hear this music, you are either shaking the head. If it is reggae, you can even twist. But whatever, there is the force and the power of music. And FESTAC, the Festival of Black Arts and Civilization, will demonstrate, the type of music. And happily, it also has some introduction as to be the background of that Festival of Arts, so that you can then see it, and it will have, I will not have to make any comment after that, because then you just enjoy yourself. And please, let's listen now. Thank you. Thank you.
FESTAC 77, the second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture, held in Nigeria brought together 15,000 participants from over 70 countries. At the official opening ceremony in the Lagos National Stadium, contingents from 47 countries paraded before government officials, visiting heads of state, and a capacity crowd of 100,000. The first contingent was from Ethiopia, which is to host the next festival. The aims of this festival were to revive and promote Black and African cultural values and civilization, to illustrate the various contributions that Black and African peoples have made to the universal currents of thought and the arts, to foster better international and interracial understanding, and to give Black artists, writers, and performers all over the world a feeling of belonging to a common root, despite the diversity of their individual cultural identities. It was very striking on this first day to see just where the participants came from all over Africa, of course, but also from the Pacific, from Europe, the West Indies, and the Americas. It was perhaps to the Black communities of the diaspora, those peoples who have been uprooted to other continents, that the crowd gave its biggest and warmest welcome. The regatta has long been a popular entertainment among the peoples who live in the many river and delta areas of Nigeria. Originally employed for defensive purposes against invaders in the days of intertribal wars or for large-scale fishing expeditions, the traditional regatta is now a picturesque and colorful event held to celebrate special occasions such as the coronation of a new ruler or the visit of important dignitaries. It is also closely associated with religious rites, for example, funeral ceremonies for a chief or thanksgiving to the water gods after a particularly successful fishing expedition. But today, whatever the reason, the regatta offers an unforgettable spectacle for any visitor to Nigeria. And those attending Festa were treated to a dazzling display of waterborne music and color. The National Theatre in Lagos was the scene of many important events throughout the festival, including an international colloquium on the theme Black Civilization and Education, organized with the help of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. At the ceremonial opening, Ifa priests, led by the Araba of Lagos, poured a libation and cast kola nuts for the success of the colloquium. The subject of the colloquium was a vast one, and during his opening address, the Nigerian head of state, General Obasanjo, approached the problem of black civilization and African languages, one of the 10 sub-themes discussed by the delegates, and one very close to the underlying theme of education as a basis for development. The standing tragedy of all blacks and Africans, wherever they may be, said the head of state, is that their tongues have been pulled out, and they must speak in strange tongues. To overcome this standing tragedy, we need to keep humility, patience, and painstaking dedication.
It is my hope that all these attributes will go into our quest for knowledge about ourselves and our contribution to human knowledge and civilization.
At the first meeting of the colloquium, attended by many distinguished scholars, artists, and thinkers, the Director General of UNESCO, Amadou Matambo, said that the theme to be debated represented one of the major contributions to the festival. Mr. Mbo went on.
Son importance me paraît grande pour l'Afrique, pour les pays.
I think it's an important theme for Africa, and for those countries of the diaspora, our brothers and sisters from the West Indies and the American continent, as well as for all those other people in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific who present the same human and cultural characteristics, or who quite simply have the same aspirations as the peoples of Africa.
Ou ont tout simplement les mêmes aspirations que les peuples d'Afrique. Ce festival intéresse donc au
This festival is therefore of the greatest interest to UNESCO, whose vocation it is to contribute to human progress and forge stronger links
because
of
I want to know
cooperation
when to stop
between
the
all
video.
peoples, while respecting the cultural identity of each and every one of them.
Then they will have some questions.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The peoples of Nigeria are particularly proud of their cultural heritage, and the Durbar, organized as part of the festival at Kaduna in northern Nigeria, was an opportunity for the emirs of the north to display their richest
It's just
traditions.
real important questions.
The history of the Durbar in
Like you
northern
said,
Nigeria
they've never had
goes
this
back as
opportunity
far as
before,
the
and they may
12th
have
century,
something
long
in their
before
heart
the
that they want to
Sudanese
know, you know?
arrived in this part of Africa. It was originally
Once you
a
say
victory
so.
parade,
Huh?
but with the
Once you
Sudanese,
say so.
it became a ceremonial presentation
Anything you say?
to mark the enthronement
Yeah,
of the new
no.
emir, or
Because
more
I know
recently, a way
it
of
must
paying
come
tribute
from your
to
spirit,
very special
and that's
visitors.
important.
Here then are a few moments of this colorful pageant representing the whole royalty of northern Nigeria.
So I can stop the video then, and then we can then take the questions, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll stop it here. Yeah, there are still so that festival went on for a long time and it covered so many domains: educational, cooperation, partnership building, culture. And in fact, there was a section on the first 200 years of African history, because that was the time when it was said that Africans had no history. So they were trying to prove that it is not possible for a human being, not a group of people, not to have history. Even if it is recording that the husband and the wife fought, that is already history. So it's not possible not to have history. So it was then recorded, and then they now demonstrated that there was a lot of migration that had been going on in parts of Africa. There was a lot of empire building and so on that were going on. And so the colloquium also handled that, and so many other things. If you perhaps go into the internet and look at Festac, because a lot of the information has been deposited on the internet so that people can see what happened, at that time. I arranged the first, 30 years after, in 2007, of Festac to be shown as an exhibition in Paris at the United Nations Educational and Scientific Cultural Organization headquarters, and I invited the Secretariat of the Black Festival of Arts to come, and they showed all the countries that were there, with all the partners and so on. And I think it was one of the very successful exhibitions of that year. So I invite you to look at all that. But if I'm going to focus attention mainly on Festac, because it was held in Nigeria, I think it would be unfair, because I will be focusing attention more on Festac and less on what I thought is very important for us now, namely the status of education, status of access to education, status of quality of education, status of funding of education, status of partnership building in education, status of levels and parameters of education, and so on and so forth. And because I believe that perhaps we will have one or two questions, from the floor, that will help me, because most of the time when I am talking to my students, I don't know what they want to hear. It is only through the questions that I'm able to know what is of interest to them. Otherwise, because they don't want to disrupt my talking, they allow me to do all the talking, most of the time really irrelevant, and I just do that and I go back and I feel sorry for myself, having not addressed those things that are of interest. So if the university authorities agree that there should be questions, I'll be very happy to answer those questions. But if I do not have answers to those questions, I can give you the references of some very, very solid works that have been done on those aspects that you may be of interest to you, so that you can go and search the net and then have answers, or perhaps go to Amazon and then buy the book. That's also a possibility. Thank you very much indeed.
What we would like to do is go ahead and open up the floor for questions that you would like to ask.
Father Jesus, please.
Hi, sir. My name is Ajmal. I'm from Afghanistan originally, and I used to work for UNDP and WFP before in Afghanistan, before coming here to the US. Also, I'm majoring in political science, and I'm Muslim as well. My question is for you, sir, that according as I heard that you have been working for United Nations and I've worked for United Nations too, so I know you know the general rules. But what do you think is the move for the UN to have good, for example, UNESCO to have good influence in those nation education for stuff like that? Second part, another question is that what do you think? What do you think about the culture stuff? For example, the influence, as you mentioned earlier, that some people do not agree with certain thing has been changed. But what do you think if for the rights of the people, that if they want to change certain things, because certain things could be for political reasons. So what's your view on that?
I
have one more question. If you can answer that, probably I don't know. It might be out of the context, but about the UN Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. What do you think would be a good idea for the United Nations to fix that problem of, because that is very kind of thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. This, the three questions are really very helpful. The first is the role of the United Nations in the promotion of education, and I just want to say that on the afternoon of November 16th, 1945, in London, 37 countries met after the war because they believed that education was the real issue that would bring about the war. And so they said that they were going to have the constitution of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. But before then, they decided to have the two-page preamble, and the preamble started with one paragraph that says, since wars develop in the hearts of man, it is from the heart of man that the process of peace must be constructed. And that to be able to construct the process of peace, they have to make sure that education is built into the minds of everybody. The education in terms of opening access to learning for everybody. That's number one. Two, to ensure that bitterness, resentment, and so on are discouraged in the educational system so that you grow up to be a very informed, balanced, enlightened, and sensitive person so that you respect the culture of other people, you respect the right of other people, the religion of other people, and that you begin to learn to live in peace. And that was how the United Nations began to take an interest in education. And then I joined as a consultant to that United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization about 32 years ago. I started working as a consultant, trying to build bridges across the various nations of the world, and then trying to encourage everybody to work together before I now went, as my country's ambassador to that organization and stayed there for 10 years. So I began to see what the United Nations can do in the area of education. But I also saw the limitation of what the United Nations can do, because unless a country is cooperating, there is no way you can force another country into it. And if a country has already made up its mind that this is the way it wants to go, there is no way that we can force that one. Everything was always done. Usually, every 2 years, a general conference is held, and decisions are adopted. The budget is agreed upon. The paraphernalia of administration and governance was always agreed upon. It was always a question of everybody, coming together. I hope that I have already, responded, to that question. And the second question, I think, is also related to the United Nations. The United Nations is it's a complex. It has many forms. There is the one that is dealing with specialized form like education in Paris. There is the one that is dealing with conventions on trade in Geneva. There is one that is actually on labor also in Geneva. And there is one that is on human rights that is also in Geneva. There is the one that is on health alone in Rome. The World Health Organization also in Geneva. The one dealing with agriculture in Rome, the Food and Agriculture Organization, etc., etc. United Nations is just the world. And you make the United Nations what you want to make of it, because you are free, to form groups and so on. And sometimes some people will just decide to go on their own without the United Nations. Sometimes people will say, okay, we use United Nations, etc., etc. I think in the end, you then find that United Nations is actually you yourself. I don't know if I have responded to all the questions. You spoke about chapter 7. I'm not so sure.
6 and 7. Yeah. What do you think would be better to make it better and make United Nations more useful?
Okay. You were actually even talking that if some people want a particular reform, how to respond, to that. Yeah, but as I have just said, once you want the United Nations, what you need to do is you get many countries on your side, you get a resolution, you adopt a resolution, and if you can get a percentage, then you change the form, the direction that the United Nations should go. So what you need to do is to articulate, mobilize opinion, encourage people, convince them, and then we go in your direction. And then once you have the majority, then as you know, the United Nations has always gone in the direction of the majority on most issues other than defense. Thank you very much. And it seems, sir, that there doesn't seem to be much eagerness to ask questions, which means what I have said is well taken. It's considered authoritative, and I feel, oh, only the young man then. Oh, that's so nice. Oh, praise the Lord, that's good. What is what? What is the school like? Oh, wonderful, thank you. That's the best question I've had since I came to Kentucky. Because it's from the heart. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, you know, this school is, when you are thinking of Nigeria, you can only talk of Nigerians. There are those that are rich, and when they are not too comfortable with the school system, they send their children overseas. They can afford the ticket, they can afford the boarding school, they can afford the fees, and there are some that can hardly even eat because of the poverty. So such people, what they do is they sell firewood, they try to do media job just to make sure that their children, you know, are able to go to school. In the schools, many of the schools in Nigeria, you find some young ones like you that cannot have access even to good clothing. The clothes is, the shirt is torn somewhere there, you know, and the trouser, most of them have no pair of shoes to wear. For example, the present president of Nigeria did not have any shoes to wear until he was 18 years of age. You know, there are some that do not have pairs of shoes. There are some that are, and yet there are some that have many pairs of shoes. So it depends on where the school is sited. If it is sited among the rich, the affluent, the elite, oh yes, you will think that they are in here in America. But when they are the normal, you will find that the roof is leaking. You will find that instead of having the chalkboard in a place, they are learning under the tree. Then you will find that the teacher, you know, the teacher also is not adequately trained so that the type of information being given is not sufficiently authoritative, encouraging or stimulating, and that affects that learner who begins to learn so slowly that eventually when that person comes out, he begins to learn all over again. It's so beautiful, and I'm hoping that someday you will be my guests in Nigeria so that I take you to my village. You will see the school there is so different from the schools in Abuja and Lagos, you know, which is for the elite. But we are trusting the Lord that somehow there will be a change because Nigeria is very rich with resources, human and natural resources. We are one of the 10 leading oil producers throughout the world. We have very good weather, climate. We have a lot of minerals. We have the rubber plantation. We have all sorts of things. Then we have capable, competent people. We are just thinking that someday we will make it. And it is possible that we will make it. So you should pray for us that we also make it. With that question, I just want to say I'm so inspired, you know, by that young one because you can already see that the future is bright before the young man because he's already thinking of other people. And what I will advise you to do is to please think of other people also away from here. Think of Africa. Think of Asia. Think of Latin America. Think of the Caribbeans. The world has become interconnected, that you cannot just sit here and just be enjoying. You have to go out there and be of service, be a help, and in partnership growing as you have been developing others, you will all go up there so that there will be no question of friction, there will be no question of infighting and bitterness and rancor, but everybody being together. Someday it will be like heaven on earth. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.